Uh, yeah, that's what I felt like doing today. This is Mavis, by the way. One of my earliest memories is Mavis, like in a Thomas episode. I think Mavis is Diesel. So Mavis isn't really economically, what's the word here? Economically? No. No, actually, like, she makes money for a capitalist. Really, like, she's not environmentally healthy to have. And it's just because, like, the way that the system, like, necessitates diesels and shit. Anyway, that's another video for another time. I wanted to come in with a bang, because we're doing another one from the old, this year Queering Anarchism book. Wanted to show you this, because Queering Anarchism has been actually a really nice book to the channel. We've learned quite a bit from Queering Anarchism. And I actually kind of wanted to do, before we begin doing today's discussion, which is Anarchy, BDSM, and consent-based culture, I wanted to just go over the table of contents, which they call it, so aptly they call it discontent. So I am going to read this off, and I'm going to and every time I read from this book starting forward, I'm going to consider, just like having, people tell me in the comment section if they hear this list or they see it in the link below where you can read the PDF for PDF for free, then yeah, you can just like, download it and like read it yourself and have me pick your favorites, and that's what I am gonna do here, is read the list. But we're gonna do one that is actually the very last chapter in the book. I think so. I think there might be something else after it, maybe like an index. Yeah, oh yeah, after this, we're doing the very last chapter in this book, and after that it is just acknowledgement, author and editor bios, and then like index. So yeah, we're gonna go through the whole list because there's a lot to read from this book, and we're only reading 6 pages of this book today. And I think that there are some other, there are some other chapters in this book that are worth reading. And I have read some of the chapters on this book before, and they are really good. Like, there's a lot of history involved, there's a lot of perspective involved. I also think that this is just honestly a very, like, underlooked book. It's an underrated book. Like, not a lot of people are mentioning this book, and I would like more people discussing it and having, like, maybe book clubs around it, especially if you're like, queer, radical, anarchist, trans, LGBT, of any part of the spectrum. Like, I think it's really, really, you really owe it to yourself, honestly. So anyway, enough introduction. So here's the table of contents, preface, and then there's the introduction, queer meets anarchism, anarchism meets queer, gay marriage, and queer love. We did a video on that one. D is essentializing anarchist feminism, lessons from the trans feminist movement. That is one we have not read, actually. Police at the borders, gender sabotage, anarchy without opposition, lessons from queertopia, tyranny of the state, and trans liberation. We have read that one on the channel before. I really enjoyed doing that one, actually. I learned quite a bit from that one. Harm reduction as pleasure activism. Funny that this one's in here. We actually have another book over here called Pleasure Activism. And it's actually, I have not read very much of it, but there is, I think Lord Audrey's in this one, so I think it's worth checking out. We can have a stream dedicated to Lord Audrey. That would be super cool. There's also Radical Queers and Class Struggle, a match to be made. A Diverse of Sex Tactics, Part 1. I don't know if there's another part, because Yeah, oh yeah, a diversity of sex tactics, part 1. Queering the economy, queering heterosexuality, polyamory, and queer anarchism, infinite possibilities for resistance. That's an interesting way to phrase it. Sex and the City, beyond liberal politics and toward holistic revolutionary practice. Queering our analysis of sex work, laying capitalism bare. We did this one previously. It was a really good one, in fact. Queer cripping anarchism, intersections and reflections of anarchism, queerness, and disability. That's a good one we could probably look into as well. Straightness must be destroyed. Yes, it absolutely must be destroyed at all costs. You think I'm fucking around here? No. Straightness has to be holistically abolished as a system, as a primary function of otherization in Eurasia. But yes, okay, that's one of the chapters. We will read that one day. Fuck it, that'll be what the... Fuck it, I can see the thumbnail now. Straightness must be destroyed! It's gonna happen one day, folks. Hold on to your seatbelts. It's gonna be a bumpy ride when we get there. It's like a promise I'm gonna keep or something, like a blood oath here. Anyway, and then yes, the last one. This is the one we're gonna read. Anarchy, BDSM, and consent-based culture. Yes, we are reading the very last page. Not page, chapter. So, excuse me. This is going to be a short one, and I am excited about that because I like knocking these out, especially when it is a topic that I am extremely interested in. For example, I have been talking about on the channel a whole lot about, like consent being like taught in sex education, building relationships. We had, discussions here on the channel where we talked about how like the entire education system, being abstinence only sex ed, it doesn't help at all whatsoever what its goals are. In fact, it does, on average, statistically speaking, increase teen pregnancy. And it spiked ever since, the Reagan years specifically, where the evangelical aspect of, the 80s in the U.S. empire, they were, holy shit, we could go on to the whole aspect on how they did not address the AIDS epidemic until like the 7th year in Reagan's administration. Holy fucking shit. Sprinkled down Reaganomics my ass. Just sprinkled down in the toilet, I say. Sprinkled down my fucking asshole into the toilet. God damn, I fucking hate capitalism. I'll tell you what, friend. Capitalism's just no good. Ain't no good around these parts. Gonna have to drive that shit out of here. Anyway, so this is... I don't know where I was going with that. I think where I was going with that is that sex needs to be taught in a more, let's just say, informative way. Where, people know how to just build relationships and, they know how to build their own, boundaries and levels and shit like that. I'm talking when you have a relationship, you essentially want to be on mutual grounds, on, how you are going to maintain that relationship. And that goes for friendships or, romantic, platonic, any dynamic that you choose to have. But, ultimately, the real thing you have to have there is, you need to have that, communication and it's based on consent. No means no. A lot of people mistake, silence as, yes, or you get to decide. No, that's not true. Like, if that person is being quiet, maybe they're intimidated, maybe they're undecided, you know, maybe it's not a good idea to pressure them. Maybe you need to back off. If they are not answering, maybe assume it's no, you know? I try to do that sometimes. I try to figure that out, and like if that's how it is, and it's just like, then yeah, I should back off and let them decide. They might want to later. It's like they might want to advance on that relationship later on. You know, it's one of those things that I feel like could be taught in sex ed. You know, to have that level of communication where it was like, you know, better established. And, you know, it was like, you know, we taught, like, our own analysis on our own relationships with each other. So, Anarchy, BDSM, and Consent-Based Culture by, I believe the name of the author is Hexy. It is spelled Hexe. So, there you go. That is how you spell it. If you want to speculate on how to pronounce it, please let me know. I don't know what origin it is. It's a very nice looking name. I like it. Has a good energy to it. Let us begin. I want to talk about anarchy, and I want to talk about BDSM and kinky sex. They are both incredibly controversial subjects. So let's start slowly with some lube. As if we were going to attempt anal sex. I like where we're going already, baby. Let's do some defining. Defining is great. It makes sense from previous confusing subjects. So BDSM is an acronym that has several interpretations. Indeed, it is a compound acronym. It is derived from the terms bondage and discipline, BD, and BD, like B and D and B/D. I'm probably saying it like I'm a complete dweeb right now, so sorry. And then there's dominance and submission, which is D and S or DS, like Nintendo DS. So I think what he's saying is that like, the Nintendo DS is kinky as fuck. I don't know. Okay. And then it includes a wide spectrum of activities, interpersonal relationships, and distinct subcultures. Participants usually take on complementary but unequal roles within a BDSM context. The idea of consent of both the partners become essential. That is like the most important thing said right here so far. The idea of consent of both of the partners becomes essential. Often, participants who are active applying the activity of exercising some of the controls over others are known as tops and bottoms. Tops and dominant, sorry. We have a bunny here, folks. Bunny is happy in his cage, he's just laying down. That's what I thought that was. He's just going to sleep. I think you're gonna go night-night. Oh, go baby. So sleepy. Maybe I'll show them to you guys later when we're done. You're such a good boy. You're so sleepy. Oh, I love you, baby boy. I'm sorry, I love him so much. Anyway, what was I saying? Okay, so often participants who are active applying the activity or exercising of some form of control over others are known as tops or dominants. There we go. Those participants who are recipients of the activities, who are controlled by their partners, are typically known as bottoms or submissives. Individuals who assume either top dominant or bottom submissive roles, whether from relationship or relationships with in a specific relationship only, that's an interesting sentence there, are known as switches. Okay, I think I know what it was trying to say. It didn't say it very well. Sorry. The differences are not immediately apparent outside of, to the outside observer, but very important to the people who identify with them. There are also people who enjoy aspects of BDSM that are not explicitly sexual. BDSM is based on sexual practices, but also incorporates our daily interactions and experiences with power. So that is the very, very tip of the iceberg. Inevitably, no matter what, someone somewhere will find offense with any definition and start a heated discussion about it. So I want to make it very clear that, like, a lot of people have, like, said to me, including my own mother, have said to me that, you know, we can't be teaching BDSM in school. So it's like, sure, you know what, like, I think, you know, I don't think kids should be involved in sexual activity until they're 18. Not that I have any control over that myself. But at the same time, they should be informed on what sex is in the first place. I know grown adults who are older than me, and I'm like about to turn 30, by the way, folks. Like, I know adults older than me who have never even heard of what BDSM is or what BDSM is about, but like as soon as you show them like leather and a whip, they'll be like, oh, that's freaky sex shit or something like that. Like, no. Like, BDSM is far more complicated than that. Like, BDSM, you know, honestly, let's just be real here. It actually extends even further than the bedroom. Like, in a lot of ways, like, BDSM is almost even, like, the only framework that... Now, I wouldn't say the only framework here. That's not the word I'm looking for. It's a framework that analyzes hierarchy in relationships, but more in, like, more like sexual relationships. And also, like, romantic relationships as well. There's a lot of times where, like, you know, BDSM dynamics are involved in platonic relationships otherwise. So, it's kind of interesting. Kind of interesting when you look at it that way, because it's just like people develop relationships differently than one another. It's like, when I say straightness must be destroyed, like, straightness, it's actually, like, a very rigid and binary set of, like, relationships that are socially acceptable. And I say this because, like, you know, straightness was, at one point, and arguably still is, very, like, racist as well. Like, we're talking, like, you know, they were, you know... You go to a protest 50 years ago, and you'd see people protesting against, like, interracial relationships. You know, like, it's fucking wild. It's literally, like, just white supremacist as it gets in that respect, you know. So the reason why I'm bringing all this up is because, like, when you have that, like, very narrow way of looking at relationships, it doesn't help, you know, you maintain your own relationship or build one yourself, you know. And it's just like, I feel that in the past for me, that's also been a problem too, because it's just like relationships come into fruition differently through different circumstances and things like that. And I think if I had learned all of this stuff when I was younger, honestly, like in school, I feel that I would have been I would have been better at learning how to maintain those relationships into my adulthood. But I feel like that's not something that was established ever. And I feel that also, like, whenever I think of sex ed, I always think of, like, teacher giving the lecture on my first day of sex ed that I had. And, like, the kid raised his hand and he's like, so how does the sperm know when to come out? Because it's just like, even if you explain the entire process in which, like, sex happens and stuff, like, sex isn't just missionary fucking sex. The purpose of sex is not just to reproduce. And, like, relationships is not just purposed for the sake of marriage and, reproducing more, workers for the productive labor of the private ownership of the means of production under capitalism. I just don't think that, like, that's what we should have in like in a maintained society, if we are going to ever maintain one, like, that is a system of some sort. But I don't know. I just think that state coercion fucking sucks, folks. Okay, like, I fucking hate state coercion. That is the worst. It is fucking ass pool. Let's do this shit. Let's rip this open. Let's see. The diverse rainbow of anarchy, henceforth referenced to as the anarchy bow. I never heard of the anarchy bow before, but okay. Oh yes, yes. Okay, I know exactly what this is talking about. Okay, we're about to go into some relationship anarchy territory here. My goodness. Here we go. It can be a confusing mess. It is comprised of bickering theorists. Sorry. It is comprised of bickering theorists, insurrectionists, primitivists, armchair radicals like me. There you go. I'm an armchair radical. Calling me out there. Okay, I get it. The occasional right-wing jerk, all struggling to be correct about the next tactic or developing analysis. Damn. Okay, there is often disagreement with the anarchy bow. This disagreement is particularly rapid due to a basic consensus. The anarchy bow disagrees with itself, with the rapid intensity of people who share similar ethics, debating how to change the current world order from a hierarchy based on abuse and exploitation to a system without someone at the top of the of the oppression pyramid scheme, and without the entire pyramid scheme. What we want is a system that benefits everyone and eliminates prejudice and racism and all the inequalities of capitalism. And then we all have our own unicorn to ride along shining streams, because you want your own unicorn to ride into battle against capitalism. I don't know if you can see it, but I'm like, there you go. Okay, anyway, that was awesome. In an attempt to simplify the anarchy bow, I have defined what is, to me, the first unwritten rule of anarchy. The first unwritten rule of anarchy is, don't be a douchebag. All of the fancy theories, all of the discussion about tactics and support and building a new world by tearing it down, the old and whatnot, all come down to the fact that in this world, people are often douchebags. There you go. People are often douchebags. They are douchebags to one another. They are douchebags to the planet. They are douchebags to animals. Might douchebag to you, Arnie? I hope not. There are whole systems of indoctrination that teach us to be douchebags to one another. From time to time, we are children. There we go. Many people have spent lots and lots of time explaining the ways that people are douchebags and how the structure of society teaches us to be douchebags. The goal of anarchy is to change that, not just a little, but entirely. All of our wonderful systems of organization and activism that work so well are often undermined by the brokenness of the system we are raised in. Okay, my apologies there. The way that even in a non-hierarchical organization, there are often people who call the shots, or the person who is always getting their way and not allowing others to speak. We are the result of hundreds of years of oppression, colonialism, capitalism, genocide, racism, and sexism. Well, not me. I'm not a subject of any of that. I shed all that and I'm good. I'm kidding, of course. I'm making fun of the white savior there. Anyway, let's see. And yes, by the way, that stunt alone does not shed me of that criticism either. Just making that clear. Let's see. But it is not wrong what they just said there. Let's see. It is not too... I feel like I lost... Where was I? Where the heck was I? Darn. Okay. I think that stunt, unfortunately, made me such a douchebag. I was a douchebag there. There you go. Let's see. Don't call me a douchebag. I feel like, okay, I'm just gonna start here. All our wonderful systems of organization and activism that work so well are often undermined by the brokenness of the system we are raised in. I'm sorry, okay, here we go. I know where we are at now. I am such an asshole. There you go. Anyway, let's see. We can't help but to have internalized some of that. Even if we are dedicated to changing the system, often this happens on the traditional lines of gender and race oppression, but other times it is subtler. In attempting to dismantle a busted system, we all bring our own baggage and prejudices. What we can do is learn from it and work to make our practices of anarchy as equal as possible. Before we continue, I'd like to just say that, like, anarchy is evolving all the time. Like, in terms of, like, how we understand anarchy and how we analyze anarchy. I would say that, like, the way Bakunin and Pierre-Gilles Proudhon and Kropotkin and Goldman, the way they understood anarchy then is different than how we understand anarchy now. And more importantly, like, you know, I mentioned these names, but it's like they're not the ones who invented the concept of anarchism. Actually, like, there's a lot of anarchist beliefs in Christianity. There's also a lot of anarchist beliefs in Taoism, believe it or not, which goes back several thousand years. We're talking, like, ancient China. Like, honestly, anarchy is, like, a subject that extends beyond a few European philosophers from, like, Eastern Europe, I guess. Like, I just think that a lot of people, they tend to forget that when they look at it, when they look at anarchism, you know. Anarchism isn't something that, like, is a Bible that you get at, like, your Barnes and Noble to pick up your Conquest of Bread. Like, yes, you can get Conquest of Bread, like, you know, and analyze Kropotkin's work and all that, and, like, then you can get your anarchy badge at Etsy or something like that. But, like, honestly, and yes, this is from Etsy, by the way. Don't at me. But at the same time, it's like, what I'm trying to say is that your analysis of anarchism is always evolving. Your analysis, everyone's analysis, anarchy's gonna be, like, understood differently over the years. Like, literally just how the material conditions affect how we analyze things. I can tell you for certain the way we understood anarchism before COVID-19 was a lot different than how we understand it now. You know, same thing for before Trump's election. Same thing before, you know, every presidency or every major oil spill or every drone strike, every, global catastrophe, natural disasters, climate change, fucking every war, every stage of colonialism. Like, our understanding of anarchism is absolutely historic. Like, and I mean, like, I'm sure even, attributing, credit to some degree to Kropotkin, I think Kropotkin would also agree with some of those points. In his own study, he would actually defend that. If we're talking about, like, the understanding of evolution, Darwinism, and its refutal of social Darwinism, I think that would remain consistent, in my opinion at least, with my critique there. Anyway, that's all I gotta say about anarchy. Okay, I am gonna just quickly check here. I think we got a few more pages, so we should be good. Revolution is a funny word. It has been assigned to many things, and according to the cultural history of the United States of America, there has already been a sexual revolution. A lot of people in the last century did a lot of work around sexuality and freedom, and we are benefiting from it today. But there were radicals before the hippie movement who were doing and saying the same thing about sexual freedom. The sexual revolution has been happening for a long time and continues to do so. Some people even go as far as to say anarchy is love, which sounds like we're all a bunch of hippies with fancy analysis of politics and anti-oppression and whatnot. But I'm sure Emma Goldman had no fucking clue what a hippie was going to be, and she was all about love. True. Emma Goldman was a huge badass. Sadly, There are no surviving pictures of her riding a unicorn. I believe there are hundreds of sexual revolutions happening every day. Every day, people accept themselves and their sexuality and support one another. To subvert the heterosexist idea that the only valid sexual relationships are between one man and one woman. The dominant narrative says they must both be cisgendered, having a match between the genders they were assigned at birth, their bodies, and their personal identity. This oppression hurts us all. Sex can be very personal. Sex can be very personally revolutionary. It can be healthy, and it can be a form of self-care, and it can be medicine, but only if it is done with full consent and participation of all parties. Historically, anarchists have been very vocal about supporting sexual freedom and queer rights. Emma Goldman spoke out against marriage and for the right of women to have access to birth control. Her lover and compatriot, Alexander Berkman. We have a book of Alexander Berkman right there. It's a good book. We'll read it again in the future. Alexander Berkman wrote about being queer and supporting queer rights. Anarchy has always been a little queer, and anarchists have always been nerds for sexual freedom and choice. Why not BDSM as well? You might have noticed I used the word queer in several different ways. Originally, queer was used to describe something odd or abnormal. It is also used in reference to a group of people. Traditionally, queers have been folks who engage in sexy time with people of a similar gender, transgender folk, and the word extends to include those who engage in relationships outside the heteronormative monogamous party line. The label queer was reclaimed from being a slur, an insult. That's how tough we are. That's how tough we are. We can take language intended to hurt us and turn it into a something completely different. That's how tough we are. Pow, 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 pow. I love it. I'm gonna shoot fucking laser beams at fucking straight pride protesters. The definition has fluctuated and is often in debate. To queer something used as a verb is to subvert it, change it subtly or radically, like we did with the use and definition of the word itself. The Anarchy bow both loves and hates queerness. Like in the anarchist community, again in the BDSM community, there is the problem of people coming to it as a sexual practice with the same amount of baggage as when people come to anarchy. I sometimes heard people speak to their personal practice of BDSM as if it cures all things. In those experiences, I felt like I was witnessing a personal spiritual moment. I am not a proponent of choosing anything as your shining light, though as a human race we have a tendency to do so. The mainstream BDSM community have been called out in many instances for sexism, heterosexism, racism, ableism, and not being accessible to people who are not middle class or financially liquid. Financially liquid, that's another one. Let's see. Financially liquid. Sexism, the act of gender discrimination, is a problem in almost every part of this society, and hence carries over into BDSM spaces. Heterosexism is interesting in the context of the current incarnation of the mainstream BDSM community, which often identifies itself as a pansexual, open to all sexualities, gender, and space. The history of BDSM in the United States comes directly from queer spaces, particularly the gay men, leather, and fisting community, quickly taking hold into lesbian spaces as well. At a certain point, some called BDSM the practice of radical sex. One thing the BDSM community adheres to, which a passion, is the idea of consensual power exchange. A scene can look non-consensual, can be playing with non-consent, but it is still just playing. Excuse me. Excuse me, friends. One experience with BDSM, like any sexual practice, is personal. For some, it is not something they will be interested in for various reasons. Some people just aren't wired kinky. Some people need time to work out their feelings about it. There are a lot of guilt around sexuality in general, and around non-normative sexuality specifically. It is a hard journey for a lot of us to a place where we are comfortable with all aspects of ourselves and our sexuality. Another thing folks have come up against is just plain bad experiences with BDSM. Maybe the person they played with was a jerk and didn't respect their boundaries. Maybe they had a bad experience with the community they joined to experience BDSM. Maybe they just felt alienated by some of the monetary barriers of the BDSM scene. Play parties cost a lot of money, conventions cost hundreds of dollars, and that's before you add in lodging and food. Or perhaps the overwhelming lack of people of color in many kinky communities as a barrier. There is a value in BDSM as a fun thing, as a human needs, as a fulfilling practice, and as a way to play with power, and just as a way to play with an adult. We can't take off our skin color or gender easily, or switch up our privileges at the drop of a hat in the real world. So we can play with power and control, or the lack of it, in a BDSM space. And it ends when you are done, not when the intersections of oppression and privilege stop doing their various screwy things, because that might take a while. Like, outside of the bed. Like, that's something that's gotta be actively fought against all the time. That part's not in the book. I read that last part. Or I said that last part. We're chipping steadily away at them, but the Leviathan of inequality is massive. The ability to play with power can teach us new ways to understand how we have internalized different parts of the abusive dominant culture, and new ways to think about resistance. Doing Anarchy might not include practicing BDSM, but doesn't exclude it either. BDSM and Anarchy have more than their fair share of differences, but if anything, there is one fetish both anarchists and BDSM folks share, and that is a fetish of consent and organizing people. Both communities are consent-based cultures. Consent is the act of agreeing to an act, situation, or circumstance by various means, generally verbal or written. Occasionally implied consent is used in medical situations, so caregivers can administer medical attention while someone is unconscious. However, administering a life-saving protocol and having sex with someone are too drastically different to fall under the same guidelines of consent. By consent-based cultures, I mean they talk about consent, they discuss ways to gain and give consent. As a community and as individuals, they write things about consent, what it means to them, and how to implement it. The dominant culture is terrible at consent. Capitalism doesn't ask you if you want to be exploited. Patriarchy doesn't ask if you want to be considered a second-class citizen based on what's between your legs, or inversely, be taught to be an oppressor based on what's between your legs. We are all constantly learning how to give and obtain consent, and not everyone is good at it yet. Everyone has a story about a creepy anarchist or a messed up kinky person. Not respecting folks. Through applying active principles to consent to our lives and our sex lives, and taking that into every relationship we have, sexual and non-sexual, more and more people will be able to use those skills, and we will always be improving our own use of consent. Everything and anything can be revolutionary. The most insignificant tool can begin an insurrection. Anything that is fulfilling, healthy, and does not harm anyone else can be medicine. any community as an as a community and as individuals, it is a revolutionary act to be dedicated to consent. Doing anarchy and doing BDSM are not things that intersect often, except in the lives of people who practice both. However, if there is something that anarchy, or rather the anarchy bow, and ethical BDSM practice can give to the struggle for a just society, it is the skill of active consent. And everyone gets a unicorn. Who wants a unicorn, folks? You want a unicorn? I want a unicorn. Do we have a unicorn around here? I guess we don't have unicorns, but I do have a rabbit. I guess I can show you the rabbit. I'll do that then. That sounds good. So here, I'm gonna show you the rabbit. Okay. Because I promised I would show you the rabbit. Okay. I'm gonna show you the rabbit. I'm gonna show you my baby boy. Baby boy. Here you go. Here's baby boy. Don't be shy on me. Don't be shy. Here you go. Say hello to everyone. Say hello, friend. Just wanted to show everyone Ami, because Ami's a good boy. He's just a little baby bunny, and I'm just the big bunny. I'm the big bun. I'm the big bun. I'm Mama Bun. So anyway, thanks for joining me. I hope you had a good time. Stay tuned for a video this month. I hope I get it out before Halloween. And yeah,